What's up, everybody, and welcome to the pre-lock show here on Thursday Night Football. We're in here. What is this? Is this week 3 already? I think this is week 3.
Yep.
We're in week 3. We're going to call it week 3. Thursday Night Football going to get us cranked up for the whole weekend here. This is the one that kicks it off. Then you get a little football on Friday, a whole bunch on Saturday, and a whole bunch more on Sunday. So this is the one. We're about 35 minutes till lock. And we are here, guys, to answer your questions. If you have any questions, shoot it off in chat. We will absolutely get to it, guaranteed. And we'll walk you through some players and just kill some time here before the lock, before the thing kicks off for Thursday Night Football. I have to say, Kyle, not a particularly great afternoon. We wrapped up our college football show. And then I find out my boy Trayvon Diggs out for the year, man. What a damper that put on the whole thing, man. So that sucks. Hope he gets better soon, but that stinks for the Cowboys. But we got to deal with this game tonight. Giants 49ers, man. What you thinking about this game? We got about a 10-point spread here, a low total. Seems like a mismatch. I don't know. Give me some hope here. What do you expect to see in this game?
Yeah, it's not looking like it's going to be a pretty one based on all the Vegas lines and totals and all that stuff. Definitely think that we're probably going to have better Thursday night games, but last week was a good one, so maybe we'll get another one here. There's some big fantasy names in this one, so maybe we'll have some fun things to talk about. But yeah, based on the spread and obviously Saquon being out, I do think it's a pretty significant mismatch, and I think 49ers should be able to take care of business pretty easily here. But I think the spread will maybe bring in some names if the game does turn into a blowout, bring in some unique value names or situations where maybe some guys can surprise us here from a DFS perspective.
Yeah. Also, my apologies. I'm burying the lead too. The last time there was a pre-lock show here for Monday Night Football, our boy Squirrel, he called his shot, man. I'm not lying. Like the dude sat here and told us every single play that he thought was good on the slate, and he put him on a roster, and he won $1 million, unique too, which is like even more crazy than actually winning it on a showdown, is to be the only one with that lineup in that big field. So shout out to him, man. Hopefully we can carry over that legacy tonight, and one of us walks away with a little million. Are you signed? Are you in the contest yet?
I sure am. I'm gonna burn some money in the millie here, or maybe maybe it'll be my day, but we'll see one way or another.
Yeah, we'll see what happens, man. We're gonna get there, but I see the chat's pretty active. I want some questions, those guys. You need to fire off them questions, because that's what makes this show tick, is you guys firing off those questions. But yeah, we can get to it here. Well, let's start off with a few questions here in chat. I like to get to them. That way you got plenty of time to do whatever you need to do. We're about 31 minutes till this thing locks up, so that's when we'll be out of here. Lip, our boy Lip, thoughts on Jennings and Kaplen. What do you think about Jennings and Kaplen with the news? And I'm gonna get to the inactives here in a minute, but with the news that came down the pipe here earlier, Jennings and Kaplen, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's not my favorite captain. And I think that there's even going to be some other guys who sort of fit the same mold as Jennings. A cheaper, less owned receiver. I think I actually have a couple of names that I'll throw out later that I like more than Jennings. And again, we'll dive deep into those guys more. But basically, Jennings, I thought we would have seen more playing time from him last week when Ayuk was out, and that wasn't necessarily the case. But I think he's fine. I think he's going to be involved. I think if he finds the end zone, he can definitely pay off that price tag. So you could do worse, but there's probably some other names that I like a bit more than Jennings as like a low-owned captain guy.
Yeah. Got some questions. I'm going to answer them here in a minute. I do want to get to the inactives real quick, because that's kind of what really helps us out, as opposed to a show that's earlier in the day or earlier in the week when we don't know the inactives. We kind of knew Saquon was going to be out tonight. That news has been coming down for the last few days, so we know he's inactive. I'm not seeing a lot of other names on the New York Giants list. Azeez Ojulari is a linebacker that typically gets some snaps when he's healthy, so it doesn't help them as far as their depth, but that's not a deal breaker right there. For Frisco, we got news a couple hours ago. Brandon Ayuk is out tonight. He will not play tonight. So we're going to talk about that situation and who we think is going to step up for Ayuk later on. Other than that, Ambry Thomas is a little used cornerback. He'll get some snaps when he's healthy, but that's it though. Ayuk on one side, Barkley on the other. For week 3, those are pretty darn big injuries, and so we have to account for those things. But we're going to talk about the Ayuk situation here soon. Speaking of Saquon being out, Your thoughts on Brightwell? Got a question in chat. Your thoughts on Brightwell? Man, I'll give you my thoughts real quick, then I'll ask Kyle. But my thoughts on the Giants running backs, I don't care if Saquon's out and that opens up lower dollar guys. I don't want any of these running backs for the Giants. And I'll talk about who I may target for the Giants, but it's not a running back. What do you think about Brightwell?
Yeah, I agree. Like, it's not a pretty situation for the running backs. There's a handful of different things, but three key factors for the running backs is there's not going to be one guy that steps up and takes all the work. I think it's going to be a two-headed, I guess monster or a two-man backfield here, maybe even three. I wouldn't be surprised to see Eric Gray mix in there along with Brightwell behind Breida, and then tough matchup. And then obviously you have Daniel Jones and his rushing production going to be taken away from these running backs. No, I would probably be pretty afraid to play Brightwell, especially with a ton of confidence. Obviously, when it's a guy that's that cheap, you can sort of do whatever on showdowns. But I like Eric Gray more than Brightwell here. I think Eric Gray could surprise some people, maybe play some more than Brightwell based on some preseason trends and some draft capital stuff. So I think Gray's the better player, and I think I would not be surprised to see him play over Brightwell here.
Friend of the show, Butthole Jenkins is in chat, and I got my Plums play of the night later on. Plums play of the night. I'm feeling some things from this game. Fire off those questions, guys. We're going to answer them. Let's walk through some players right now to pass some time. We got about 28 more minutes here until this thing locks up. Quarterbacks: Daniel Jones, Brock Purdy, the two to choose from tonight. Yikes. I don't know, man. What do you like? Purdy's good. We don't know about the game script. It kind of doesn't matter. You never know. The game script could be created because Purdy goes crazy in the first half. So you might eat him up in the third or fourth quarter, but he can make up for it in the first half. Daniel Jones scares me because he's just not that good, to be honest with you. I hate to tell that to Giants fans. They just gave him a contract and everything, but yeah, like watching them last week against Arizona just get demolished in the first half. It's not pretty, man. So I don't know. Neither one of these guys really do it for me, but Purdy can obviously get it done. What do you think about the quarterbacks tonight?
Yeah, I mean, I really don't mind no quarterback builds today. I think especially if scoring is down, you can easily find some guys down the board here that are a little bit cheaper that might be able to pay off on a point per dollar scale. But, if I had to pick one of these guys, I still think I would side with Daniel Jones if I didn't have any salary just because he has some rushing upside. But, price considered, Purdy is a little bit cheaper. So I think both of these guys are less than exciting options for me. But really, I mean, if Daniel Jones has 40, 50 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown, that could be all he really needs to pay off on a showdown slate, especially one that could potentially have little scoring. Now, again, I think that there are a couple of other options that I like more, and especially when you're talking about the value on their salary. But yeah, I think it's tough for me to get really pumped about either of these guys here tonight.
Yeah, I agree. I'll come back to Purdy in a minute. I'll talk about him in a second, but a couple questions here. Number one, are both kickers in play? Nathius J. I apologize if I butchered that. Both kickers, I would say so. I would say, yeah. There's outside chance that New York is, if they're really, really bad on offense, hell, their kicker might be their best player. So, yeah, I think both kickers are in play. Here's one for you. I know you dig into this kind of stuff. Who is the wide receiver 3 now for San Francisco with the Ayuk injury? This man, Chuck Deuces, wants to know if it's Bell or McLeod, or do you have another guy that might sneak his way in there?
Yeah, so I think this could be two guys. I think it'll either be Juwan Jennings or Ronnie Bell. I think McLeod will get some playing time, but I don't think he'll be used as a wide receiver 3. When you talk about Ayuk leaving the frame, and they have to find somebody more like Ayuk to replace him, right? Like you're gonna have Debo play in the slot, and obviously he'll move around, but he's more going to be an inside-out guy. And then McLeod is sort of the same style player as Debo, so I don't think McLeod has a ton of paths to play a ton of snaps here. Bell played a lot more than I thought he would last week when Ayuk was out. I think he played over 60% of snaps, so he played more than Jennings, so that does tell us a little bit of something here. But he didn't run very many routes, Ronnie Bell. He was a good blocker in college, and they used him that way last week as well. They would basically trot Ayuk out there for plays that they knew they were passing, and on running plays, Ronnie Bell was out there. So it'll be interesting to see how that factors in here tonight when they don't have Ayuk to fall back on in the passing game. Will Bell play on those passing snaps, or will it be Jennings? I tend to lean Jennings because he's a more experienced guy. He's been in the offense for a while and he's played well at times. But Ronnie Bell's going to play tonight. He's going to see a good amount of snaps. They're going to play him at times instead of Jennings. And obviously, I think that he'll be on the field during some run situations, which doesn't necessarily benefit us, but it does get him on the field. So I think it'll be Jennings or Bell tonight. I don't think McLeod will be the wide receiver 3 here.
Just shooting off some questions here. Paris Campbell, what do you think about Paris Campbell tonight?
Yeah, I don't mind Campbell. I think the receivers here for the Giants sort of scare me. You have Wan'Dale Robinson coming back into the fold. He's active tonight. I guess we'll see how much he plays, returning from that ACL injury. You have Jalen Hyatt, who finally came on, made a couple big catches last week, but that's all the catches he was able to put up, so not a ton of consistent production. You still have Sterling Shepard active. I don't think he'll play much. I think if Wan'Dale Robinson does play a significant amount, it would be taken from Shepard's role. Isaiah Hodgins, he found the end zone last week. So there's a lot of guys here, a lot more than you would typically be comfortable with, and Darius Slayton's been the guy running all the routes for this team and playing the most. So Slayton's my favorite Giant receiver. And then Campbell would be my second favorite. But yeah, Campbell, being a little bit cheaper than Slayton, I think he's a fine option, but he wouldn't be my favorite Giants receiver.
Yeah, I'd answer that by going, I'm not really much into Paris Campbell tonight. If I was going to go with a Giants receiver, I kind of like me a little Jalen Hyatt, just a chance at a long touchdown. I'm not sure the Giants are going to have many sustained drives, so let's go for a big play guy there. Question, friend of the show, Jared Barton says, any long-term injuries after the Kirk Dees dirty play? I mean, who said dirty? Yeah, Jared, you're throwing words in there that weren't there originally.
No long-term injuries. Luckily, I think maybe not dirty in hockey, but for sure dirty in basketball. I think I think Kirk might have just forgot what sport we were playing that day. But yeah, no long-term injuries.
Kirk is the Dennis Rodman of the amateur leagues. He's all defense, man. He gets after you, so can't give you nothing cheap, man. Can't give you nothing cheap,
Nope.
Kyle. You gotta make you earn everything, man. Who's on FanDuel? Who's your favorite single entry MVP? One entry. Oh, everybody only has one entry in this thing, so you don't have to go chalky. You don't have to go too crazy. Who's your favorite over there, MVP?
Yeah, so we talked about this on the Sunday night show, and I think I like to lean into being really contrarian in these showdown slates. A lot of people are going to have McCaffrey. I'm going to go Debo as my favorite captain here. On FanDuel, we talk about it. You talked about it on the college football show today. That's a site where touchdowns are important because you need those guys who are going to find the end zone. And Debo, he's not going to have the benefit of the PPR scoring, but he has a lot of touchdown equity on this team, and especially in a spot with no Brandon Ayuk. Shanahan came out last week after the game and said, we played McCaffrey more than we wanted to. He basically said that he was overusing him and he regretted it, which I don't love to hear, especially coming into a short week now. So I have some, again, as much concerns as you can have about a stud like McCaffrey, but that gives me just exactly what I need to prefer Debo over CMC slightly. And, Debo, one of my favorite props for tonight is a Debo Samuel 2+ touchdown, plus 800 over on FanDuel. I love that number. He had 2 touchdowns last week, and I think he could do it again here.
Yeah. It feels like with Ayuk out, a little bit more centered target share there for the Niners. It feels like one of these guys, whether it be Debo or Kittle, feels like one of them is going to have a multi-touchdown game. So I feel you on that one. I like that one. But let's talk about some pass catchers. We just kind of talked about Debo. I like Debo too. I talked about Jalen Hyatt. I think Jalen Hyatt would be my off-the-radar guy. Big field, go for it. We kind of hit on Wan'Dale Robinson from, if you know him from college. He's a nice playmaker in college, man. Haven't really done much in the pros, but he's out there now. You got any sleepers in this position tonight that you could roll with?
In terms of just wide receivers, I guess the biggest sleeper that I would have would be Ronnie Bell at 200 as a value play, but I don't know how much of a sleeper he's going to be now that he is, he's popping at a decent number in our projections. I'm sure he's projecting to a point where he's going to be one of the better point per dollar plays across the industry. But I love your Jalen Hyatt call. I think him or Slayton are both in a spot where you're going to be on a team that not expected to do all that well. They're going to be throwing a lot. They might need some deep shots. And, if you're on a team where production is scarce, you need guys who can potentially, make it all count in 1 or 2 plays and 2 catches. And I think Hyatt and Slayton fit those molds. So I love the Hyatt call. And and I like Slayton a lot. So those would be my two favorite Giants receivers, and I think they'll be fairly under the radar, as well as I think people are probably going to try to avoid a lot of these Giants.
Lots of value at wide receiver. There was a question earlier, and I meant to get to it. It says something about can you be chalky in a lot of spots if you're leaving 5K on the table? Absolutely. The more salary you leave on the table, the less duplicated you're going to be. I almost guarantee it. So yeah, throw you some chalky guys, and if you're leaving that much salary, you're perfectly fine, man. And with all this value tonight, you can definitely make a good team and still have a whole bunch left on the table. So that's perfectly fine. Tied in some more pass catchers. We haven't talked about Darren Waller yet, who might be the best weapon for the Giants in general. Tight ends are a tough matchup in most cases anyway, especially a guy like this. Got Waller on one side, Kittle on the other. How much of these tight ends you going to have?
Yeah, I'm going to have a lot. I like Kittle a lot here. I like Waller a ton. Waller's my favorite Giant pass catcher. He's been used a lot, and I think they're going to need him even more with Barkley out. A little bit concerned about if this game does turn sideways really quick. I think he's probably pretty quick to get pulled. But then again, I thought that in week 1 too, when he was dealing with a hamstring injury and they were down 40-0, and they were still trotting their starters out there in the fourth quarter in the pouring rain. So that might not be much of an issue here. But yeah, I like both of these tight ends quite a bit. And especially if you're like me and you kind of want to be a little bit underweight on Christian McCaffrey, it makes a lot of sense to use Debo and Kittle a ton, just because, San Francisco is going to put up points, 26.5 implied totals you can see on the screen there. So they're going to put up points, and it can be a pretty condensed offense at times. And CMC's not doing it. Guys like Kittle and Debo are more likely to. So I like using both those guys in lineups where I'm not playing CMC.
Here's a question from Mr. Ray in chat. Should I play or fade the 49ers defense? I'm going to let you have first crack at this one.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to like about 49ers defense. Obviously, they're really good, and obviously Daniel Jones sure can turn the ball over at times, but I just typically don't play a ton of defenses in Showdown, and I think that especially in some smaller field stuff, we might see a lot of ownership on this 49ers team because of that thought. And I think a lot of people are going to build lineups where it's 5-1, 5 49ers, 1 Giant, 4 49ers, 2 Giants, and I think defense is going to be a pretty popular pick this week. And I'm probably going to try to fade that chalk or be a little bit underweight on it. But, it is definitely a scary fade, because I would not be surprised to see Daniel Jones turn the ball over 3 or 4 times here.
Yeah. So let me ask you this then, piggybacking on that, because I was having a conversation earlier with somebody about defense in captain or MVP. And I was just saying, I think you probably have to have a defensive touchdown in most games for that to really pay off. Tonight, maybe that's different. Like, who knows, but I don't think it is, because, you could get the Debo, the Kittle, the CMC, any of those guys could go for 2 touchdowns. And all of a sudden, that's the optimal captain with all the value out there. So I don't think I would never play defense in a captain spot anyway, just because I think you need that touchdown. But what's your thoughts on a defense and a captain? Would you ever do it, or is there certain circumstances, or what do you think about that?
So I probably wouldn't say I would never do it, but it'd be very unlikely for me to do it, because in the times where defenses are the best plays, I think, is when they're super chalky and super optimal, I suppose you call it. For example, if a team's playing Zach Wilson or a backup quarterback, and the public wants to pick on that quarterback or that offense, so I tend to stay away from that. Just their ceiling is limited, like you mentioned. They do need a defensive touchdown or like a 6 or 7 sack type game like we saw from the Cowboys in week 1 in order for them to really be optimal, especially on a spot like this where you have McCaffrey, Debo, Kittle, even Darren Waller. I think all these guys, for captain, you should be aiming for, the highest score, or someone who has the highest score, or a super value option. And usually defenses aren't priced like a super value type of price range. So I tend to stay away from it.
Just glancing at the Discord chat, here's a question for you from Brad Collins. What range of salary, and this is always a tricky question, what range of salary are you willing to leave on the table tonight?
Yeah, that is a tricky question. I guess I'll just speak based on my single entry lineup. Right now, my single entry lineup has just over 2,000 left on the table. So definitely okay with that. And I mean, as long as you like your lineup, but there are a couple of $200, $400 players tonight that actually project better than some $2,000 players. So if you're doing that, like you could probably make a case for leaving like $6,000, $7,000 on the table. And really, as long as you still like your players, I guess the bottom line is I just wouldn't be worried about salary at all. Don't worry about filling up your salary. You made the point that the more you leave on the table, the less likely you are to deal with duplicates. So, I wouldn't be worried too much about how much you're leaving tonight.
Yeah, that's all you're trying to do is sometimes it's impossible to avoid being duplicated by other guys, but to have a shot at the big money, like you just don't want to be duplicated with guys with thousands of others, and then you take first place, and yeah, it's a nice chunk, but that 100,000 up top turns into $1,500 for you because you just kind of want to be unique, and that's the only thing about leaving salary is just to make yourself unique. If you feel good about your teams, the salary doesn't matter. We haven't really talked yet about running backs. I think this is a big, big thing right here. This is where I would say I would differentiate from the field tonight is running backs. Obviously, McCaffrey's the best in the game probably, and he'll be popular tonight, as he should be. They've already come out and said, unless Shanahan's totally duping us here, which is possible, he said what he did last week playing – like Eli Mitchell played no snaps last week. McCaffrey got them all. The week before that, McCaffrey got virtually all of them. He said, I'm playing this guy too much, and it's too early in the year. Yeah. So all of a sudden, you hear that, and that makes me think, okay, maybe they ease off tonight. Now, he could get 30 snaps tonight and still score 3 touchdowns. He's that good. Yeah. But what does that do for you when you hear that kind of coach speak?
Yeah, so I think especially on a showdown slate, like you have every reason to try to be a little bit different. So like that can just be like you're just using that more of as an excuse to say, okay, yeah, now I can feel a little bit better about a McCaffrey fade or being underweight on McCaffrey and maybe liking Eli Mitchell more. I think even if you didn't have that quote, just naturally it would make sense to consider Mitchell. There are, it's a 10.5 point spread here. They're on a short week. They're already dealing with injuries across the board. McCaffrey, obviously, we know he has had injury history in the past. So even if you didn't get that quote from Shanahan, there's plenty of logical reasons to assume that Eli Mitchell could see some more work here. And then, you take into account that he did make that quote and he sounded regretful that McCaffrey has been playing as much as he has. And all of a sudden, I think Eli Mitchell is one of the better plays in the slate. Another thing that I found pretty interesting when doing some research is there's a couple of sport books out there with Eli Mitchell, his touchdown odds like plus 190, plus 185. I know on FanDuel it's still at plus 300 or plus 310. At least it was about an hour ago. But for him to have, he's like 4th or 5th in terms of touchdown odds on this slate. So plenty of reasons to like Eli Mitchell. He's probably my favorite running back on the board tonight. So I think he makes a lot of sense. I think the price tag is good. So yeah, I think he's one of the better plays on the board.
Yeah, so that was my thought too all day long. And that's kind of where I was at. And I'm still on the Eli Mitchell. I like him quite a bit. I think he gets a little run tonight. And I think, if he does anything, he could definitely end up in the optimal as a flex. I don't think he's a captain or MVP. I don't think there's that much meat on the bone for him, but I definitely think he could end up in the optimal in the flex. Now that Ayuk is out, okay, so I'm starting to go a different route. We got 11 minutes left before we lock this thing up, and I'll answer some more questions. But let me talk you through this one, Kyle. I'm just brainstorming here, man. This is where my head's going. So IU gets ruled out, and we kind of think McCaffrey's going to maybe get eased up a little bit tonight. So the tendency is for everybody to read these things and go, Eli Mitchell. Okay, maybe Eli Mitchell's the guy, or they say Debo's the guy, and Debo definitely jumps off the page. But if you're going to ease up on McCaffrey, why wouldn't you ease up on a guy who's even more injury prone, Debo? So what if they ease up on Debo also and McCaffrey, and they haven't used Kittle hardly at all this year? And the Giants, 80-year-old Zach Ertz kind of had a good game against them last week. And the week before that, the only reason why Ferguson didn't have a good game is because he dropped multiple passes. It could have been who knows what. So maybe there's a little weakness there in the Giants. Maybe this is a George Kittle game. So I'm starting to think maybe I should throw some more George Kittle in there. What do you think about that, buddy?
Yeah, I love that call. I like Kittle a lot here. I think if I was ranking the 49ers in terms of the guys that I like, and a lot of it is a little bit of game theory, but it would go Debo, Kittle, and then McCaffrey, which just sounds crazy because I think we both agree that he's the best running back in fantasy right now, and he's obviously awesome. But again, for Showdown, you have thin margins, right? There's a lot of dupe lineups. There's a lot of top heavy payout structures. So I think leaning into that volatility of these contests and getting extremely different is kind of the way I want to go tonight. And frankly, on most Showdown slates. But yeah, I think Kittle makes a lot of sense, and the price tag is pretty friendly for him as well. Sub 7K. Yeah, and I think this could be a spot where they're kind of just acknowledging the fact that you want to get Kittle going a little bit after a slow first 2 weeks.
All right, Andrew asks, who's the DK captain in single entry? I'll go with you first, then I'll answer. DK single entry captain.
Yeah, I think it'll be the same answer for me as it was on FanDuel. I like Debo in that one there. I think if you are fading McCaffrey, you want somebody like Debo or somebody even like Kittle in the captain spot, because you have to assume that we're going to get some scoring here for the Niners. And if McCaffrey is doing it and you don't have him in your lineup, you're probably just done anyway. But if he's not doing it, Debo and Kittle are probably the two most likely to pick up that production. So I like Debo there.
Yeah, I think single entry, I'm going to have to agree. It's Debo. You don't have to go too far off the reservation, man, in
Yeah.
single entry. So Debo's a good one. That'd be my choice too, Andrew. Something much bigger. It's probably going to be a different answer, but Debo definitely single entry. Let me see here. What else we got? What do y'all think about Robinson? I think we've kind of touched on Wandale Robinson. I call him Wandale. My apologies. It's a college thing, but just recap what you think about Wandale tonight coming back off the inactive list.
Yeah, I think I'm just a little cautious with him because he's been out for a while, and there were some reports that said that he might have been able to play last week, and he was probably good to go last week, but they just held him out as a precaution. Usually that is a good thing for when they do finally return, and there's some outs to him being solid. If they want to use him in the backfield a little bit more with no Saquon, they can definitely use him in unique ways, and I think he's an exciting player at times. But I'll probably hold off and want to see it first before realizing he could be potentially not getting all the snaps that you'd be hoping for.
Mitchell wants to talk FanDuel for just a minute. He says he has no quarterback in his build tonight. I think that's an interesting approach, and I definitely don't think Daniel Jones is a guy you have to have. Man, it is tough on FanDuel for me to get away from both quarterbacks. You would think one of them would do something, but what's your thoughts on no quarterbacks in the FanDuel build tonight?
Yeah, I think over on FanDuel, it's a little, a bit more of a stretch there, just because of if it is low scoring, or one of these quarterbacks do, find the end zone a couple times, whether it's through the air or on the ground. For someone like Daniel Jones, they're probably gonna have a good chance of being in the optimal. But I think if you're just playing in a super large field tournament, a lot of people are going to flock to the quarterbacks. And if you want to say, hey, maybe we'll only get some rushing touchdowns, maybe Debo and McCaffrey will score on the ground, and Purdy won't be able to get there. Maybe Daniel Jones won't have a very good game. There are definitely reasons why you would want to do that, but I think that those are more so in super large field tournaments.
Big time friend of the show, Big Show Brandon says thoughts on Kyle Juszczyk. I'm gonna let you have this one first. Kyle Juszczyk.
Yeah, so Juszczyk hasn't seen any offensive production so far this year. He hasn't been targeted, hasn't had a carry, so they're not using him in the same way that they have at times in years past. And I don't know if this is a spot to do so, especially if we're going to see a little bit more of Eli Mitchell. So I'm probably staying away from the juice tonight.
Yeah, he'd probably have to fall into the end zone a couple times, and it could happen. If they want to lighten up McCaffrey's load, they get down inside the 5. Maybe they give it to him instead. But that's his. I think that's his out, his touchdowns, and I don't want to have to depend on that. So I'm probably out on that Big Show also. But what's up? We got about 6 minutes left here before we lock up. Keep those questions coming. Leaving 10K, Andrew, leaving 10K on the table in one line. That's a lot, man. But hey, man, that's what floats your boat. So you go for it. What else we got here, Kyle? What else we want to talk about here? We want to talk about some. Well, I guess we haven't hit on kickers. Now we're in a defensive. We feel like one of this is going to be kind of a lopsided defensive game, and the other is Jake Moody for Frisco. I don't know. What do you think about these kickers? Usually they're really good in cash, but what do you think about tonight kickers?
Yeah, I think you could do worse. I think that I would rather play a kicker than a defense tonight, just because they're a little bit cheaper than the 49ers defense. But we've talked about some of these Giants receivers that we like with Slayton and Hyatt kind of being in that same price range as well. So I would rather take stabs on those guys who I think have a chance to break big plays, maybe find the end zone, or even dropping down a couple $1,000 for Eli Mitchell there. So I probably won't have a ton of the kickers tonight.
All right, we got about 5 minutes left. Another question: Paris Campbell or Darius Slayton for a single entry for you?
I'll take Slayton tonight.
You take Slayton. Probably between those two, I'm probably on Slayton also. Even though, like I said, I'm probably more leaning Hyatt in the receiving core, Waller as a tight end for the Giants, and no running back. So I'm not a big fan of the Giants. But real quick, let's do the thing where we go back and forth here for a couple of picks on DraftKings. Give me a captain, your favorite captain for DraftKings. Or we should just plug in Debo, right?
Yeah, let's say Debo.
All right, you plug in Debo. I'm gonna go Eli Mitchell. I think he could get a little extra run tonight and maybe grab something and end up on the optimal. So I'm going Eli. So if we go Debo, ball control, get some carries and everything in captain, then we got Eli, carries also. What's our next flex after those two guys?
Yeah, let's stick with the Niners here. Let's go George Kittle. Like I mentioned, if we're not using CMC, and right now with Debo and Mitchell, I think that we're probably trending that way. And let's try to soak up all the potential touchdowns that wouldn't come if CMC was finding the end zone here.
All right, so that would leave us, it looks like on the screen, we got 9,200 per player. We'd have to have a Giants guy. I mean, I might be way off base on this, and he could definitely get shut out tonight. I'm going to run something like this back with Jalen Hyatt to get just bink a long touchdown here. He's their biggest threat in the big play game. So I would plug in Jalen Hyatt right there and see if that worked. And that would leave you a whole bunch. You'd be leaving a lot of money on the table too. So if you had Samuel up top, then Mitchell and Kittle, and you ran it back with Hyatt, what's the one guy you would round this thing out with?
I would probably go Purdy, just because you have Debo in the captain spot and you have Kittle out there. So if both of these guys are finding the end zone, obviously Debo can run one in, but I think it's more likely that both of these guys find the end zone through the air, and obviously Purdy would benefit from that. But I love Hyatt being in there. I was hoping you'd either go Hyatt or Slate in there. I think that makes a lot of sense as the guy who could also get there late in the game. Keep in mind too, if this game is real ugly and maybe the defense falls asleep, or we got some backups in there, and maybe Hyatt catches a long one. So I like that call a lot.
And if you're looking at that one and you see 13-2 left, the last thing you want to do right there is plug in McCaffrey and zero out your roster. That's not what you want to do, guys. So you'd want to pick anybody else, leave a bunch of money on the table, and that'd keep you from getting duplicated. But I think something like that would look good. All right, we got about 2 minutes left. I think it's time, man. I think it's time to give our favorite pick of the night. Kyle, I'm going to let you go first. Who is the guy that you just absolutely love tonight?
Yeah, I mean, last week it worked out with Hawkinson finding the end zone twice, and I'm going to go to Debo. I know he's not super contrarian, but I think he finds the end zone twice here. So I'm going to go Debo, and I think that he scores twice.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I was all on Eli Mitchell earlier in the day. I've heard his name a little bit too much now, but I do like Eli Mitchell. I was on him pretty heavy earlier. Then IU got ruled out, so then it was like, well, maybe it's a Debo night. They once a guy gets ruled out like that, San Francisco will center their attack, man, on just a few pass catchers. So maybe it's Debo, but of course he's going to be popular, and I'm going to let you have that one. So I'm going to change I've just kind of changed up in the last hour or so. I think my Feel It in the Plums play of the night is going to be George Kittle, man. I feel like he's going to have 2, maybe 3 good games a year these days. That's about what he does. And I think this is going to be one of them. Get him off the schneid, maybe a 100-yard game, maybe a couple touchdowns, something like that. So I'm going George Kittle. He's going Debo Samuel. Guys, got to all your questions. We got about 45 seconds. We're going to jump out of here. Good luck in all those GPPs for our producer, Steve. That was Kyle Murray, DFS. I was your host, Chop. We'll be back on Monday Night Football, but for now, we are out of here.